In this video I'm going to talk about the impact of technology on society and on the world. My name is Joosten. I'm a biohacker and a cyborg futurist. I write articles on the topics of human enhancement, human augmentation, technology, the future, and I also, as you can imagine while you're watching this video, I also make videos. So if you like what you see, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel down below. And I also give keynote presentations and webinars on this topic. And if you want to also have more information about that, you can find the links also down below in the show notes. So let me start with a story. It's around the year 2000 and I'm 16 years old. And it's hot because I'm standing in a glass house near the house of my parents. Because I was in a glass house because it was my job during summers and also during the weekends. And it was really hot because these roses that were growing inside the glass house, they need a humid atmosphere and also high temperature and a lot of sunlight. And I was standing there and sweating, and I had all these bruises on my underarm because I had to cut roses and then put them on my underarm. But as you can imagine, with all the thorns, etc., it's really devastating to my really nice underarms, and now they're way better. And one day the manager comes to me and he says, "Peter, I want to promote you," because there were a lot of employees in the glass house cutting roses, but then all these roses, they were brought to a warehouse, and in the warehouse was a sorting machine. In the sorting machine there were like 4 or 5 people standing next to the sorting machine, and these are all the roses that came from the glass house, and then you have to pick them up and put them in a sort of assembly line. So they're hanging in an assembly line like this. So the assembly line is going, and then you put your roses in. And there's a camera in the sorting machine. Then they make a photograph of each rose, and then it decides if it's good enough to go to the shops, to the eventually to the consumers, or if it's like a second-grade batch. And it's really nice because I was really proud that I made the promotion. It was also not as hot as in the glass house in the warehouse. But I must be honest, after a couple of hours I got demoted again, because if you were standing with the machine, you have to have like really good motor skills, and you have to be really quick, like put the roses in the assembly line and really quick. And yeah, I did not have these skills. So the manager came to me and he said, "Well, Peter, I like your work, but I think it's better if you return to the glass house." And somehow that story really stuck with me about, like, in the old days, I was told that it was a human job to look at these roses, to look at the quality and then decide if we can sell them on the market or in the shop, or maybe to put a lower price on it and sell it to other facilities, or maybe to give them away to the employees so they can give it to their boyfriend or girlfriend or mother, in my case, at that age. And so I also thought, well, that's an advantage and it probably helps the company, but it also, like, I had to adjust to the tempo of the speed of the machine and not the other way around. So that was, which made me think about what's the impact of technology, not only on a company like that grows roses and sells them, but also on individuals like me, their employees, and how did it change because of such a machine. So I think that's a little story which resembles a greater picture about the impact of technology on society. So to give you an overview, I'm going to start with technological progress. Then I'm going to talk about what I think is the most important thing, namely the impact that technologies have on society and the world. Then I'm going to talk about the negative consequences, also named moral hazard. And I'm going to end with 3 recommendations. Because we are standing on the forefront of a lot of technological developments, and of course they are already on their way. And I think for the coming years we'll see the biggest implications of the advancements of artificial intelligence and of biotechnology. And these technologies will impact us all as individuals, organizations, companies, government organizations. That will also influence our environment. They already have, as you can say, not particularly AI and biotech, although you can also make some arguments about that, but previous technological developments like our engine and also the use of electricity to power up all the devices we have. So we are in the midst of a gigantic technological progress. And I think the most important takeaway is that these technologies also will change our society. To give you two examples, the first example is the use of smartphone. And well, I don't know if it's also the same for you, but I do not use my smartphone solely to make phone calls or to send text messages. But we of course have all these apps on our smartphone. Think about Uber, Airbnb, social media. And for each of these applications or apps, you can make an argument that it's changed also part of society. For example, taxi drivers compared to Uber drivers. Maybe we have less hotels in cities because of the advent of Airbnb. Maybe in the future, with the rise of artificial intelligence, we also get self-driving cars. And what would that mean for, again, taxi drivers or for the transportation industry? And as a result, what would all these people do that are currently in these types of jobs? So we already see that smartphone is also already changing the society. And another example is CRISPR. This is a method for genetic modification. I also made a video about genetic modification because that's my specialty, to look at what is the human of the future. And of course, you can also use genetic modification to change our cells. Well, I think that's one of the best examples about how technology will change society if we indeed change the humans that are in the society. But you can also think about the use of CRISPR-Cas9 and genetic modification to make crops to be better prepared for a lot of water, or maybe better resistant against heat. And in that way, maybe we can feed more people on Earth. But there's also the dual use of this kind of technology, that you can also use it for ill purposes, for bioweapons or other things. So these two examples show you that already with smartphones, they have a gigantic influence on ourselves, on companies, and on society. And I predict that in the future that will be more and more, because also of other types of technologies. So I mentioned genetic modification, other developments in biotechnology, but you can also think maybe on blockchain, the metaverse, NFTs, quantum computing, robots, 3D printing. All these developments are heading our way, and they will change society as a whole. And there's also a quote from another futurist, Gerd Leonhard, and he states that we will see more change in the coming 10 years compared to the previous 100 years. So, wow. So the question is, are we ready for that? Well, before I continue, an important element is moral hazard. And moral hazard is, and I like to quote the work of Johann Scott from the University of Sussex. And he states that often a new technology is rolled out without a public debate about it, while the negative consequences that such a technology entails will subsequently be borne by society as a whole. And there are a couple of examples you already can see. So I mentioned the climate crisis, which is sort of an effect of previous technological developments. But you can also think of, for example, fake news, which is also a sort of effect of the filter bubbles we have, of the algorithms that you see on social media and also on other media apps on your smartphone. But you can also think of inequality, which already is a massive problem. What will happen if we have gigantic unemployment, because robots and machines will take over more and more of our jobs? Will the owners of all these technologies, of these algorithms, will they become richer and richer, and that other people, they have to fight for their living? So these are all possible negative consequences of the technological progress we are witnessing. And of course, we can also make arguments for the other side. So there's talk of geoengineering, maybe to help the climate crisis, or maybe there are also other technologies which can help to break up the filter bubbles and to fight fake news. And you can also think of maybe we can use technology to reduce the inequality of the world. But in general, I have the feeling that the balance tilts towards negative sides if you look at these kinds of developments and sometimes how I feel about the future. And that's also something that Gerd Leonhard states in his book, and I like to quote him again. We are witnessing a general lack of foresight and caution around the use and impact of technology. This is primarily because responsibility for what technology makes possible is still largely considered an externality by those who create it and sell it, and that's the totally unsustainable attitude towards the future. So maybe I sound a little pessimistic, and when we look at history, people were not all the time very positive about the future. So 400 before Christ, the famous philosopher Plato, he was against the sort of invention of writing, because he said, well, if we start using that, we will forget a lot of things. Well, in a sense, of course, he is right, but I think in general, writing gave us more as humanity than it cost us. Another example is when the first trains were riding. Some women were afraid to get inside of a train because they were afraid that their uterus will fly out. And also with the advent of telephones and telephone cables, there were people who were afraid that evil spirits will enter the house via these cables. So these are 3 examples that maybe in future generations will also look at our current day and age and they say, oh, people were so afraid of these technologies, but in the end they made life so much better. So that could also be the case, but still I have the feeling that times now are different compared to the time of Plato and trains and telephone cables, but maybe we will see in the future. So what are recommendations for you as an individual, for organizations, for companies, for government organizations, for think tanks, for everybody to be better prepared for the impact of technology that is heading our way? And I would like to mention 3. The first one is a future mindset, the second one is inclusion, and the third one is also imagination. So to start with the first recommendation, that is a future mindset. And the future mindset is that you spend some time in the week or in the day to really be actively involved in the future. So you read books about technology or maybe about future scenarios, you listen to podcasts about the topic or audiobooks, and you watch videos on these topics. So as you are still watching this video, I think you are already doing a terrific job to be actively thinking about what is heading our way and what are possible effects and the chances, opportunities, but also the possible risks and downside of that technology. And the second recommendation is diversity and inclusion. And before I dive in, I want to start with the mediation theory. And the mediation theory is also the work of Professor Peter Paul Verbeek from the University of Twente, among others. And this theory states that humans shape technology and technology shapes humans. How we interact with technology, but also as a result of that, how we interact with each other. So think, for example, of the smartphone and that we use social media to interact and have relationships with other people. So to come back to the mediation theory, that also implies that the people who make technology thereby also affect how people interact with each other and also, of course, with the technology. So in a way, you can say that by designing technology, by engineering a new technology, you are thereby also doing ethics, because you decide how the future world looks. And if then we look at our current day and age with the current technology companies we have and that have a major influence on our lives, they are all, just like me, white males. You think of the founder of Facebook, the founders of Google, the founder of Amazon, also Instagram, Spotify. So, and there's also Rens van der Vorst calls this, from the Vantis University, calls this a paradise for nerds. And in itself it's not a problem, but it is when you consider that each of these founders and engineers, they bring their own view of the world, including the blind spots and biases also in how they design and envision their application and their technology. To give you two examples of this, for example, a fact that is not well known is that Viagra was first being researched as a medication to help women with period pain. But then they found out that it also had some other benefits, but not for women, but for men. And now it's a hugely successful drug on the market. Another example of this is the work of Joey Buolamwini. And she did her research on MIT. And she found out that she looked at algorithms, so again, artificial intelligence, and how well with the use of camera and image recognition could they identify the gender on a person on a photo. And she found out that for white males, the success score was 99%. But for dark-skinned women, it's dropped to 35%. So of course, that's really devastating and astounding. And another example that we need more diversity in race, in ethnicity, in skin color, in gender, maybe also in professional skills, in the development of these kinds of applications. And if you are interested in this topic, I would recommend a documentary called Coded Bias, which really dives into this topic. And it also shows you the importance of why we need more inclusion and diversity in technologies, in technology companies, in the engineering of application, and also the introduction of these kinds of technologies onto society and into the world.
During my first semester at MIT, I got computer vision software that was supposed to track my face. It didn't work until I put on this white mask. I'm thinking, all right, what's going on here? Is it the lighting conditions? Is it the angle at which I'm looking at the camera, or is there something more?
And the third recommendation is that we need more imagination. And that's because imagination and creativity and empathy, these all resolve around the same topic that in my opinion, is humanity. And Albert Einstein also quotes that imagination is more important than knowledge. And we need that imagination to come up with these visions of the future. So what's a possible future? And also what's a preferable future? And what's the difference between them? And how can we envision the ramifications and the implication and how the consequences of certain technology into the world. So we need that skill, and I think that's still a really human skill. And then we use these visions, we come up with scenarios to also think of our own actions we can do right now to be better prepared for the future. And in this regard, I like the work of a fellow futurist Nikola Danilov. And he compares being prepared for the future to surfing or sailing. So I also did some surfing and also some sailing. So if you also are familiar with that, you can maybe also imagine it yourself, that you cannot really predict how a wave is coming, or in the case of sailing, where the wind is blowing. So you need to adapt yourself to use the opportunities that the wind or the wave is giving you, and that you also stay away from the risks and also the dangers that the wind or the wave is giving you. And of course, the waves and the winds are sort of a metaphor of future developments. So you cannot really change them, but you have to adapt and change and be flexible yourself. And in this regard, I also like to quote the work of one of my favorite authors, Yuval Noah Harari. And he states that in his book 21st Lessons for the 21st Century, that Just as the upheavals of the Industrial Revolution gave birth to the novel ideas of the 20th century, so the coming revolutions in biotechnology and information technology are likely to require fresh visions. And so the next decades might therefore be characterized by intense soul searching and by formulating new social and political models. So we also need these imaginations, these fresh visions, not only for companies and their strategy, but also for government organizations and politicians to make better sense of what is heading our way, and therefore we can use these progress to really come up with a better world and a better society. So to summarize, I talked about technological progress, which I think is the most important element, namely the impact it had on society, the possible negative consequences, also called moral hazard, and I ended with 3 recommendations. And to come back to the glass house around the year 2000. At first, when I got demoted and I was back in the glass house, I was irritated and also a little bit angry on myself and on the manager, because there I was again, it was hot and I was having these thorns of these roses inside my underarm. But then I started thinking, and actually working in the glass house was also more sociable, because there you had more time to talk with your fellow colleagues when you're passing each other while cutting roses. And that also made me realize is that I really like that part of my job, the human interaction, talking with each other, making silly jokes, and also talking about the plans for the weekend or for the week. And I had more time for that in that really hot glass house compared to sticking to the rhythm of the sorting machine in the warehouse. So, and I think that's my main takeaway, that we use these progress in technology and also in science to make us more human. And I think being more human, and of course the question is what is human, what makes us human, is also one that's really difficult and that philosophers ponder about for decades and millennia. But I think that's the key takeaway for this video, that we used these progress in science and technology to make the society a better place, the world a better place, and also to make us fulfill our human potential to the maximum. So with that, if you have a question or a remark, please leave a comment down below. Also what you see as your favorite book or podcast or series or video on the topic of the future mindset. So you can also leave it down below. And with that, you can also share that advice with your fellow viewers of this video, of this channel. And also go to my website, and the link is also down below if you want to have in-depth knowledge on the topic of biohacking, human enhancement, human augmentation, technology ethics, the impact of technology on mankind. And you can also go there if you want to hire me for a keynote presentation or a webinar. And of course, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel down below. And with that, I hope to see you in the future.